This will win or lose the football game, and again, it will be Christie as the lone deep back. Ortiz is on the line of scrimmage. Here comes O'Brien. They're going to hand it off to him. Third down and 10, 4-down territory. Flips it, dangerous, but Joey O'Brien has it. And like this, you're going to need those plays to go your way. Well, after the bye week, it is time to get back to Chalk Talk with Brett Gordon, head coach of the LaSalle Explorers. This episode of Chalk Talk, as always, brought to you by the class of 1998 12th Man Club. We appreciate their support as they support their classmate, Brett Gordon, embarking upon a successful tenure as LaSalle head coach. Brett, you go into the bye week. You're undefeated. Bye comes at a very natural time before you start phase 2 of the season, the Catholic League regular season schedule. Let's start with Calvert Hall. What did you think about your team's performance during that game and then heading into the bye week?
Yeah, we talked all week leading into the Calvert Hall game, making sure that we played a complete game in all three phases: offense, defense, special teams. I didn't think up to that point we had really put a full game together in all three phases, even though we had won the first three against three very good opponents. I didn't feel like we had really put it all together. So that was the MO going into that game. I did feel walking off the field after Calvert Hall, I felt like that was really the first time all year that it felt like we clicked in all three phases. I know Calvert Hall was struggling with a few injuries at the time. I expected the game to be a little bit more competitive than it was. But nonetheless, I'd like to think also that our execution in all three phases had something to do with the end result.
And why do you think the execution was as good as it was that game compared to the other three that you mentioned?
I just think, sometimes there's a process to all this, and, I can be as guilty as any expecting in certain ways, perfect results from an execution standpoint. We're still dealing with high school kids that have a lot of emotions going on, a lot of priorities shifting at a given time. I think we also need to learn, as far as the 2025 season goes, people are at a different place than when they were maybe or so a year ago. So certain things we just assume have taken place might not have quite happened there yet. So the development of certainly our existing starters and then some newcomers into the fold that we've brought into the mix, primarily on defense, I think it just took a little bit of time to kind of hit our stride, but I think we're getting there. We're certainly nowhere near where we need to be as we get into the October and November timeframe. But I think going into the bye with some good momentum, we're starting to get some guys back healthy, which is going to be important here down the stretch. I think overall we feel pretty good about where we're at.
What does a bye week look like? So for those just catching up, you play a game on Saturday, the 13th of September, recording this on the 24th of September. So you've gone through the bye weekend. How did that bye week look from a preparation, a practice, even an off time standpoint? And now what does game week look like as we head into a Friday night matchup against Roman Catholic?
Yeah, so from a bye week perspective, we geared it back a little bit. We limited it to 3 main practice days last week. We made sure we got back into the weight room with 3 really good sessions in there. And I think it was really just a recharge week for the kids mentally more than anything. And then we did a little bit of Roman prep starting last Thursday and then jumped in this week after a nice 3-day weekend for the players and the staff. We got back at it on Monday, full go with a Friday night game. So, we've had 2 good practices so far this week and preparing, very diligently for a very good and dangerous Roman team.
A Roman team that scheduled a regional, national type schedule. They've been on planes. They've been on long bus trips. They've played some of the programs with the logos that a lot of folks would recognize in the region and beyond. What have you guys seen in this Roman team? A state runner-up last year. Rick Preet has done a great job rejuvenating that program. What type of challenge does this particular version of the Cahalites bring?
Yeah, when you turn on the Roman film, you notice right away they have a lot of game breakers from a skill position standpoint, but they also play a very physical brand of football at times. So they have a nice blend of physicality when needed and then also, a ton of talent, between the quarterback, the running back, and the skill position players, and a very, very big offensive line. So kudos to them. To your point, they have played a pretty rigorous schedule up to this point, which we believe we have as well, and preparing themselves, for the run here down the stretch as the Catholic League season approaches. So they have our full attention. They have our players' full attention, and we're working hard this week, knowing that we're going to have to play very well to come out with a victory on Friday.
Is it a point of pride? And I know you'll tell me that you take it week to week, of course, but you have played a very strong regional schedule. Some of the best teams in Pennsylvania and beyond. Salesianum has acquitted themselves extremely well, even outside of that contest. And so, my question is, you have that schedule in the non-league, and now you start in the Catholic League with a state runner-up in Roman Catholic. The game after that is a state champ in St. Joe's Prep. The game after that is a state champ in Bonner Prendergast at the 4A level. And of course, you guys won the league last year. Is it a point of pride to be able to play in the Philadelphia Catholic League with all that rigor and talent and program history?
It is. I mean, the results are pretty obvious as far as how all those teams fared that you mentioned last year. And it's interesting. Every head coach and every program takes a little bit of a different philosophy to the out of league scheduling. And I think that can vary year to year based on the team you have, the roster you feel coming back. So we felt it was very important this year to make sure we had a very strong out of league schedule. And as it has played out so far, I think it's played out well for how we planned it to go. And then knowing we have a ton of respect for the teams in the city. I mean, there's a lot of really good programs and football players in the city of Philadelphia now, probably more so than ever before. So I think the bye came at the perfect time as far as kind of recharging some batteries, getting some guys back healthy, knowing that, those teams that you just mentioned, starting with Roman this week, are here now, and we got to be at our best to make a run at this thing.
And I want to pivot there because you bring up an interesting question and a quick thought that there are more talented players in Philadelphia in your mind than you've seen. And you've been doing this for, 20, 30 years here from back the time when you were playing Pee Wee football, right? Why do you think that is? And I'm not asking to be part coach, part analyst, part, demographics expert, whatever it might be, economics professor. But why do you think it might be that there are more talented kids in Philadelphia now than maybe when you were growing up?
Yeah, I think part of it is the 12-month around the clock focus and training that's out there that wasn't before. I think that's a big part of it. I also think that as the landscape of high school football has evolved, specifically in the city of Philadelphia, a lot of the teams that we end up on our schedule is where a lot of what I'll call some of the better players have migrated to from an opportunity to play in programs and play for state championships. So I think it's a combination of the two. I do think probably the number one reason is all that's available now and accessible for a lot of these young student athletes that are now training 12 months around the year has allowed kids now to be more physical, be faster at a younger age. And there's a lot of development opportunities that weren't there 10, 15, 20 years ago. So I think it's a combination of both of those. And I know that the reputation that we're gaining as a league from a Catholic league standpoint has a lot of players that have opportunities to decide where they want to go to school, to migrate towards those programs, to have an opportunity to play against the best players in the city.
So 12 months that you mentioned makes a ton of sense. It is the point on the counter side that, hey, a higher percentage of those kids were coming from Texas, California, Florida, because those kids always had that opportunity to play for 12 months. And now Philadelphia and the northern states as a whole, the kids are now put on similar footing, whereas in the past they didn't have that opportunity.
Yeah, I would say in the northeast part of the country, we were probably the last to adopt this modern approach to youth sports, which is, and I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it. I kind of get pulled in both directions. When you kind of get siloed into a specific sport, the pressure's there now that you almost have to do that. And I think it's hurting some of the multi-sport athletes, which I was one of back in the day. I mean, I played multiple sports at LaSalle, and I think being a basketball player and a football player both complemented the other sport in certain ways. And you see that, you don't see it as much anymore, which I don't necessarily think is a good thing. However, with the level that we want to compete at here and compete for state championships, it's kind of become the necessary evil with the teams we have to compete against and beat. A lot of them have adopted that strategy. So we're going to stick to our guns at LaSalle. We have a lot of kids that are multi-sport athletes within our program. I think we do a really good job as a school, first and foremost, messaging that to our student athletes, and then striking an important balance of making sure that our kids have the ability to do other things, but at the same time, make sure that there's a high attention to detail of what's needed in the off season to make sure that when those sports are done, that from a physical standpoint, a weight room conditioning standpoint, we're not sacrificing anything by our players playing other sports. So it's an ongoing discussion. It's one that we spend a lot of time on as an administration, as an athletic department, making sure that we have open lines of communication and making sure that all our coaches are on the same page. We all have jobs to do, and we want to make sure that at the end of the day, we're leveraging what we have in the best interest of the players.
Good stuff. Thanks for sharing that with us. We talk about Roman Catholic. We talk about the journey, right, of getting better each week. You saw a really complete effort against Calvert Hall. What is one thing that you're looking for from your guys to, whether it's clean up or just tighten up, from an execution standpoint, from a mindset standpoint? What's one thing that you guys want to see from an advancement standpoint this weekend?
I mean, if I take it in two different phases, an offensive response to that and a defensive response. I think from a defensive standpoint, tackling is the number one thing that, we're putting a huge emphasis on. Part of it is we know moving forward with some of the skill players we're going to go against starting this week, the tackling is going to be very important. If you look at the most successful defenses, they typically are the best tacklers. So that has been a huge area of emphasis for us with our linebackers and secondary in particular, making sure that, we're putting our best forward as far as our preparation goes to make sure we're as ready as possible to be really good tacklers starting this week. From an offensive standpoint, it's really to continue the idea of being physical at the point of attack with the offensive line. We started to come together with that over the last couple weeks. We certainly have the guys to do it. I think some of their confidence is now starting to rise. And listen, at the end of the day, the games are won. Most games are won based on the physicality in the trenches, and that goes in both directions. So making sure that that's a point of emphasis on the offensive side, and then the tackling aspect on defense are two really important areas that we know we're going to need to be at our best as we head into the stretch run here.
Well, we're looking forward to it. Should be a great game on Friday. Catholic League play begins. 7:00 kick at Widener against Roman Catholic. Certainly hope everyone can make the game, but if not, can watch it on Bob Long Sports. And Coach, we will see you there on Friday.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.